Hey out there, and welcome to today's Search Engine Journal webinar. Hope you're having a great day, and we're thrilled to have you here with us. I am joined with Jamie Indigo and Michelle Race, both of Deep Crawl. Today, we are going to be talking about a four-step technical SEO waltz. You know, some view SEO as a complex dance, but there are ways that you can tackle SEO challenges head-on through simple and practical framework. And so that's what we're going to do today. And so before we get too deep into this, my name is Heather Campbell, and I'll be your moderator today. Jamie, Michelle, thanks for being here with us. Before we get into some general housekeeping, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourselves and Deep Crawl?
Oh, absolutely. I am lucky enough to work with Michelle. We onboarded the team at the same time, which means we've got to learn all of the fun, great things about this enterprise giant scale technical crawler together. Michelle, tell me all about you. Pretend we've never met before.
Well, like what better onboarding buddy to have, right? Jamie Indigo. Yeah, I just love going down those technical SEO rabbit holes. I've been specializing in technical SEO for about 8+ years. Facts about me, I love my horror books and video games. But yeah, really excited for today.
Always has great recommendations on horror books and movies. Highly recommend. One day I'm going to get her play D&D with me. Until then.
Well, until then, let's get into some housekeeping, and then I'm going to kick it back to you ladies for this, okay? So if you experience any technical difficulties, please use the chat box to let us know, or, the Q&A. We'll be monitoring both of them. There are separate tabs for the questions in chat. So just take a second to get familiar with those functions. They're in the top right of your screen. The chat is where you can talk amongst yourselves, and we'll be there as well. And we'll answer as many of those Q&As as we can at the end of the presentation. There's also closed captioning. It's up in that top right corner too. So if you need that, you can turn that on. And we'll do our best throughout to link to any resources or tools in that chat. But if we miss one, just ask. Resources will also be included in your recap email. And after the webinar, please stick around for a short survey. It doesn't take any more than 3 minutes or so, and the information really helps us gauge what works and how we can make these webinars more useful for you. Lastly, you will receive this full recording later today in your inbox. Oh, we lost Jamie. Well, there she goes. She's coming back.
Kind enough to let me know my audio was wonky. So I just fixed it. Please
Perfect.
Let me know in the chat if this is better, yeah?
It did. It's better on my end too, Jamie. Okay, I'm glad
Perfect.
Someone else heard that. Okay. All right. Awesome. And if it goes out again, we'll let you know. So yeah, that's enough for me. You'll get the recap later today. We'll send you the recording and everything. So I'm going to get out of here. Jamie, Michelle, it's all yours.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're about to have a fun SEO dance party. We are calling this a waltz rather than a cycle, a pattern, whatever gitchy synergy word you want to use, because fundamentally SEO is always it depends. And when you know a series of dance moves that work across all the floors and all the dance partners, it's a better time. It gives you more flexibility and that grace, because we want to call SEO science, but let's be honest, it is a lot of art. We've got 4 steps for you today. They are visibility, diagnostics, iteration, and monitoring. And most SEOs out there will have many dance partners. We are the only people who are paid by one company while doing the will of another. So we need to move from dancing with Google to dancing with our project managers, to analytics, to our CDNs and resources, our technical SEO crawlers. It's a big party. There's a lot going on in this dance floor, and the ability to move smoothly between one partner to the next and make good decisions. That's what we're here for today. So let's take this very first step. Visibility. This is so often overlooked when we're talking about SEO problems, but fundamentally, we cannot fix what we cannot see. So let's get onto the dance floor, because the worst dancer is the one who doesn't. When we're entering this beautiful arena of problem solving, we need to check and make sure we've got the right dance shoes on. What am I looking at? Where am I looking? How can I see something? They're pretty foundational questions and basic, but overlooked so much that it's really worth giving them a little bit of a respect and love in this moment. My favorite and most important thing I've found in my career is, does the expected site behavior match real life? We release code and we expect that functionalities will have certain outcomes. But in the wild, who knows? This is particularly relevant if you're working on a dynamic site, something that's in a single page application and makes dynamic calls to fill content. You may think that you have one product with 5 attributes, but what if you have 10 with 20 attributes? They start multiplying, creating more than you expected to exist. When we get content indexed, we want it to be uniquely valuable. So using a technical crawler is my favorite means of getting visibility into the gap between expectations and reality. Michelle, tell me about looking at our existing data sources and seeing if there's anything new around.
Yeah, so let's talk crawl stats. Firstly, a bit of background. So this report was launched in November 2020. It's slightly harder to find. You need to access it via settings in Search Console, and it's designed to help you understand how Googlebot is crawling your website. It will show you things like the number of requests and provide URL examples for response codes. This is available for all of your URL prefix properties. One thing that can be useful is to verify a domain property. So this is a property without a protocol and which you can only verify by a DNS record. Trust us, it's worth the effort. Not only do you get performance and coverage data for all the different URL protocols and subdomains, but you also get access to the host report in Crawl Stats, which is on that screenshot there. So this lists all the child sites or subdomains associated with the domain that Google knows about. You want to make sure that Google is only spending time crawling those that you want them to crawl. Check for those development websites. Googlebot does not need to crawl those, and essentially it'll be a duplicate copy of your website. Have a look and note down anything unexpected. Another thing to keep track of is Googlebot type. It was confirmed that crawl budget is shared between the Googlebots. So if you have a really high ads bot, for example, you're not leaving much left for the other Googlebots like smartphone, desktop, and image.
And it's important to note that when you verify that domain property, you can instantly verify all of the URL prefixes. And it may seem like, oh, I have the domain property, I have everything you need, but there's certain information only available on the individual URL prefixes.
Yeah, so a URL prefix variant is a property that contains the specified protocol and the subdomain. The property will only contain information about the exact version you've entered, so you want to make sure you have all the potential variants verified as well. So as Jamie said, this is because some reports like security issues may only be flagged in one prefix and not the other. So you could be losing visibility of some serious issues if you don't have all of them verified. Additionally, we'd also recommend keeping hold of any old migrated domain properties where possible. You want to verify that redirect behavior is in place and also keep track of Googlebot visits.
And with those prefixes, I love that you can verify subfolders too. So you have secure, you have dubs, but you have /en/fr/es, like a bunch of language variants. You can make properties for each of those as well. When you've got a really large site, diving down that way and breaking it out gives you specific data to each area and lets you troubleshoot better. When you have these URL prefixes, you also get some critical tools. Let's talk about those, Michelle.
Yeah, so some reports are only available in the prefix properties. One of these, or two examples, are URL parameters and international targeting reports. Technically, they're classed as legacy reports and not available in the main property. Although these are classed as legacy, they're very much still in use. So, for example, the URL parameter report has inheritance rules affecting the parameter settings. For example, you may have those folder or subdomains properties verified. But if you have parameter rules set individually in those properties, those rules will be used over the rules set in the parent property. So if you block something by URL parameters, you won't be notified in any coverage reports. So there could be hidden issues. So this is why we really recommend reviewing existing settings for all your verified properties.
And this is in GSC itself. So right now we're looking at a couple of ways to play with existing GSC data depending on your verification levels. Your technical SEO crawler is still my favorite, but GSC, I mean, that is our source of truth on how Google's experiencing the site. Just a quick clarification. And We all love GSC. I don't know if anybody's ever dreamed about going through reports before. I'm not going to put myself in that spot in this moment, but I will say my favorite thing to do with Google Analytics is to twist and pivot data and see if I can look at it in a new way.
Yeah, so this screenshot here is a way of finding out which host names are getting visits within analytics. So you can access it via the way in the screenshot, or you can go a slightly different route and go through audience, technology, network, and then clicking on host name. So this report will highlight any domains with visits that also contain your analytics code. So while this is another good place to find development websites, it can also highlight other issues that could be affecting your data. So an example could be a sister website accidentally using the same GA code, or even scraped websites where someone has copied your website onto another domain. So again, it's another useful place to check.
And it's really important in our analytics to have data integrity. We want to make good decisions based on how users interact. But if you've got development sites in there, or you have a scraper site in there, we don't want to use those interactions to make our business decisions. This is a great place to check just regularly. Pop in there, make sure everything looks good. Sometimes we get used to the standard reports. This is one of the old classics, but there's a lot to be said for revisiting them.
Yeah, this links report is a favorite of mine in Search Console, and honestly, I don't think it gets much attention or what it deserves. So this report is a combination of the old links to your site and internal links report in the old version of Search Console. So you can see your top link pages, both internally and externally, and then click through to the page level detail to see all the websites linking to those URLs. But what I want to highlight here is the top linking sites report. So this essentially is what it says on the tin, the websites which, according to Google, link to you the most. This is another great place to spot your sister sites, old development websites, or even entirely different domains that could be duplicates of your website. So these websites don't need to have the same domain or GA code to appear here. They just need to link to your domain a lot. I've seen it before when old or current versions of website are hosted on entirely different domains. So maybe the old site owner wanted to keep an old version accessible, but unfortunately they've been left open to Googlebot and index, essentially making them a competitor of your main domain. So what I tend to do with this report is to filter by target pages. This is the number of different pages that a domain is linking to you from. If the number is high from an unexpected source, it could point to a duplicate spammy or staging website. So it's always good to review and make sure all is okay.
This is one of my favorites. So we all know our Crux dashboard. We get that monthly dump that says your site passed or did not pass for Core Web Vitals this month. But getting page level data, that doesn't happen for us. It's pretty frustrating. Well, you can combine data sets together. So this bottom screenshot here with top segments with good CLS, that's a little trickery we made here at Deep Crawl. We went ahead and used our crawler. We used the PageSpeed Insights API, and we call that API to get page level data. We combine that with segments. So segments are rules broken out to describe different chunks of the site. And then we know by page template what's going on. How is that Core Web Vital assessment performing? This is really useful when it comes time to not only get resources, but to rally the team and go, hey, y'all did a great job. Because we can show you gave us resources to fix CLS on the support subdomain. Here is exactly how that paid off. Everyone loves to feel like they've got a good win. Tell us about this Data Explorer, Michelle.
Yeah, the Data Explorer feature in Deep Crawl gives you an aggregate view of the metrics. So you can understand issues at scale. So for example, you can change this to view via the path dimensions. You can see your subdomains and subfolders, but also by your segments. So for example, you could see aggregate scores for LCP for each of your segments, and this helps you understand which website templates may need to be worked on first.
It's great that we've got the visibility. We've taken a look at the dance floor. We know who we want to dance with. That's our data set where we're looking at. And now that we have that, we know we're doing a waltz and not a Macarena. It's time for us to do some diagnostics. We can see it. That means we can measure it. If you want to be a great technical SEO dance partner, don't start off on the wrong foot. Devs want to make it work. They don't have a grudge against you. But if you send an email with a headline, "Website broke, please help," and a CSV, that means nothing. It doesn't let us know what exactly is broken and how to work with it. We've got to learn the steps. We need to not only know our dance partners, and if that's someone like our development team, aware of how they work, but know exactly how to replicate what we've seen and what is wrong. We need to investigate, identify, and understand the steps to resolve it. And then we need to take that information and provide it to our dance partner, someone like the developers, and be able to show them using tools how to reproduce issues and demonstrate them. Really, this comes down to, how does it break? What am I observing? Is there a specific element? Can this be measured? Is it a count? Is it a number of times that a certain behavior happens? Is it only in specific templates? So we have that segmentation tool that lets us dive down and see, we have a ton of new software 404s. They're specifically on the blog pages. It's good information because it isolates the area of impact and lets us focus our efforts. Important to know, is the behavior consistent? Things that have a tendency to exist are probably rendering problems. And it's important to know what conditions you were able to observe it in and what conditions you're not able to observe it in. Let's look at that segmentation and the idea of, when you have a giant enterprise site, that's a big dance party in its own. Not all of it behaves the same. Oh, Michelle, did you want to hop ahead to DevTools? Okay. Tell me about some DevTools.
I went too fast. Okay, let's do DevTools. So yeah, I think I was too excited to get to this one actually, because it is a must in any.
This is a must. Every technical SEO should love them some DevTools.
I don't know what I did before DevTools existed, honestly.
Well, it's important to note that Googlebot runs on Chromium, which is the same base as Chrome. So the tools you see here with DevTools, highly relevant.
Yeah, so once you've seen your crawl data and you know there is an issue that needs to be investigated, Chrome DevTools is awesome for finding that exact code causing the problem on individual pages. Your dev team will thank you if you can provide this information to help understand the problem, but also highlight whether it's an individual page basis or reused across multiple templates. So whether it's on a drop-down, for example, or a pop-up. So sometimes this can be really simple. So you need to find the code for an A tag with a relative link, which is causing a lot of crawling problems. You could just find that link on the page, right-click and choose Inspect, and this will take you straight to the code that you can copy. But what if you can't see the link on the page? This is when you go into the Elements tab and search for the URL. Here you'll find the code, and when you hover over it, it should highlight on the page. But then, what if it doesn't highlight and you can't see which part of the page it's on? This could be because it's in a drop-down or a pop-up which displays after an interaction, so say a mouse hover. So here is when you can turn detective and you can look for any of the parent tags to look for CSS classes or styles that could be causing it not to show. One example is display none. The beauty of DevTools is that you can edit the CSS on the fly and untick the box next to display none, so it ignores it. So this will help you show it on the page and you can get that screenshot to send over. One thing to be aware of is that a lot of websites have HTML and CSS present for both mobile and desktop on the same page. So you just may need to use the toggle device icon in the toolbar to switch your viewport before it shows. And not to miss out the other tabs in DevTools, so a couple of other useful ones. We also have tabs for performance. So this can help understand your Core Web Vitals data and also to see your lab data. So you can use it to understand any layout shifts and also to see the LCP element. Console errors and warnings is also a useful one to check as it flags network and browser messages. So, for example, any resources which return a 404 or messages like fonts which are sent to preload but are not used.
And what you're looking for is really going to depend on the problem you're trying to solve. If an issue is with, say, the H1 on the page, you can right-click on that H1. If you're trying to find out what the LCP node is, then you're going to want to go to the Network tab, click the box for Performance and Core Web Vitals, and then reload the page. The result's going to give you the exact node of the LCP. It's a useful tool for you in measuring what you're looking at, but it's going to shift depending on what your current challenge is. Speaking of everyone's favorite 2021 buzzwords, Core Web Vitals. So PageSpeed Insights is the only place out there that you can have a combination of both field and lab data. So that's the experience of real humans out in the wild and emulated tests to let you diagnose issues further on it. These are really big for improving Core Web Vitals. This should be one of your key ways of diagnosing. And remember, when you're running into an issue, let's check the field data first. There's the classic trope of it runs on my machine for a reason. An individual user's experience does not indicate that of a larger audience. So field data is going to let us know, is this impacting real users? And then lab data will let us diagnose the problem with greater metrics and granularity. The URL inspector tool is a gift. It gives you an honest source of truth about exactly how Googlebot indexed your page. Remember, Google uses Chromium as its web rendering service, and it takes all of your resources, that initial HTML or the crawl DOM, and builds together a page as it believes a real human experiences it. In the live test, you get that screenshot. Don't rely on that one. We really want to focus on that HTML available in the crawled existing page. Live tests are going to bypass Google's cache, the cache version that you can go ahead and look up, copy and paste that out, start looking and making sure your elements are there. Tell us more about these, Michelle.
So crawl page, this describes the most recently indexed version of a page. It may not necessarily be the live version of the page. It's just a version that Googlebot found when it was crawled. So the crawled HTML is your source of truth for understanding whether issues are affecting Googlebot. For example, if you're wondering whether hidden text is being rendered for Google, you can search for the snippet using the search function within the crawled page HTML. Unfortunately, you don't get a screenshot when you're using this, unlike you do with live test. But if you do want to get a rough idea of the content and a rough visual of the rendered page, there is a way. So to do this, all you need to do is click the copy icon for the crawled page HTML. Then go to the web page in Chrome and open DevTools. Then you'll be clicking the top HTML tab in the Elements tab, right-click and select Edit as HTML. Then just remove all the highlighted code and replace with your copied HTML. And then you'll see a rough version of what it looks like. Yeah, I've used this so many times, and thank you to Oliver Mason for that tip. Another way to get indexing information at scale has recently been possible with the URL Inspector API that was released, to the delight of many SEOs. You can finally get the information about the things like the Google selected canonical and index status for multiple URLs. Unfortunately, there is a 2,000 queries per day limit. However, you can increase this limit per day by verifying subdirectories within Search Console, as the API limit is based per verified property and not per domain.
Another reason to go in there and get those additional insights by verifying not only each URL prefix, but those key folders you care about within it. Deep Crawl Analyze. I love our tool. The timeline is a lifesaver. So when you work in an enterprise world, you probably have more chaos than cake, and a timeline view at scale to know when something is an existing dumpster fire that's been gently smoldering for a while versus suddenly your favorite dumpster has engulfed itself in flames and there's a faint mushroom cloud in the distance. You know when to act. You know when to prioritize something as, well, that's a bug existing, or this is a hot fix. We need the devs to roll out a new fix to the code immediately. And we can tie in different elements here, like those segments, knowing that, that fireball over there appears to be my brands page because they're missing all of their canonicals and we need those, is really useful to help you action quickly. Give us some more insight, Michelle.
Yeah, so another thing that you can do is also check for the consistent behavior. So you can do this by doing things like running different projects with different settings, and running multiple crawls and changing the settings. So for example, if you want to test with different user agents to check for user conditional behavior. And it's also important to check when an issue may have started. So having access to past data is really important. The trend lines for issues can really help to give the information of when a problem first started. So you can provide this information when you're sending over in a ticket, for example.
Now that we've seen the dance floor, we know what the dance is going to be. We can look at our partners. We know how to measure what is happening, how to quantify it in a meaningful way. Let's look at what it takes to make meaningful changes and to iterate one step at a time from the top. We've already done a lot of the base work we need. And the great thing is this dance lets you use the momentum of each step. You know where to look. You've established that data source. You know what the element is thanks to Chrome Dev Tools and what section it's impacted by thanks to segmentation. You know how to measure it. You know how it breaks, and you can explain that to someone else so they can reproduce it. Now we need to understand the teams. Again, if you have a large site, it's not like you can go to one dev and be like, hey, fix this thing. It's broken out into teams. Define who is responsible for each section of the website or business area. You don't want to clog up the inboxes of your allies with things they can't action on. Know their names, know what sections they're responsible for. For example, if suddenly I find that my article structured data markup is missing from the blog, I need to go to the editorial team because they're responsible for /blog and /news. When I know who to assign the client to, we have context, we have expected behaviors, previous discussions. Maybe something is broken here before, or we've made a large change recently and it's on our radar. That timeline before, when we use that in coordination with our dev sprints, we can track down to a change released on the website, a code push that went live, and the change in behavior. That makes finding where the problem originated so much faster. We can also create the dev tickets and assign them to the right teams. So no getting lost in the backlog, no jumping from team to team, no getting so jumbled that it never gets actioned. We are moving quickly and with decisive movements. We want to create tickets. Repeat after me. I will create user stories. I want my work to get done, and I want it to be good. I will create user stories. We're doing this because a ticket lets us explain, demonstrate, advise, and test. We want to create a user story that simply says, as my role, I want to do this thing in order to achieve this outcome. We want to give steps on how to reproduce an issue we've seen. If our team can't see it, they can't fix it. Visibility is crucial. We want to add acceptance criteria. What does good mean? What does done mean? We need to define that for everyone. We want to provide testing strategies as a kindness to ourselves in the future and to our teammates who will be QAing this before it goes live. It's important to note you need to break tickets out into actionable bites. Michelle, you've got experience here.
Yeah, definitely. Avoid combining multiple issues and actions into one ticket. Make it manageable, because if you add too many steps and add too much criteria, then the chances are it may not be implemented or implemented incorrectly, and that is something you don't want. So always try to split it out and take it one step at a time and prioritize what you're sending over.
Let's make an example ticket. For this one, I'm looking at a staging environment, and I found a private declaration on a cache control header, which means Googlebot can't cache it. So I'm going to clearly declare to my team what environment this occurs in. It's in staging. What device is it on? Many sites have different code for mobile and desktop. It's important to note which platform or perhaps browser is impacted. Sometimes weird behaviors only happen for Firefox or Safari on mobile. It's important to hone this aspect in. Do yourself a kindness and include the visual cues as well. Screenshots are your friend. If it's something that has a tendency to exist, take that video. It's going to be incredibly useful. And give specific code examples. For this one, with the privacy header, I want to give the steps to reproduce. So I would tell my dev team, I want you to open a new incognito Chrome instance with a network tab from DevTools ready. Grab a URL from the testing list I gave you, and go ahead and look at the resource. And when you see that header response tag, you're going to see private declared on the cache control. Acceptance criteria. Again, what does good mean? What does done mean? Your devs are not lazy. Hard facts, okay? Drop that from your lexicon, your idea of the world. We all want to make good things, but if we don't define what good is, if we don't include that in the requirements to accept changes made on the site, they're not going to get added. So list out what is required. And this one, it's pretty simple. Private declaration is removed when it's pushed to production. And I added a second one. The team forgives SEO if that private header is only on because this is a staging environment. If you have something that's not binary, a yes or no, use conditional criteria. So if A happens, then do this, else do that. And you can nest these. It's most important to give your devs resources. Again, they want to make good work, and there's great resources out there to give code examples and even link to sandbox environments where they can test with the ideas without changing the site itself. List proper engineering examples. Do not cite a blog. I love you. Please, let's be kind to ourselves and to others. A testing strategy is so important when you create a ticket. Here's the thing. If you are relying on contextual knowledge from a conversation to get a ticket completed accurately, it's not going to get done. We need to list these things out. And if you're not involved directly in QAing SEO tickets, I highly recommend that you do. Be part of that environment, and you'll see the importance. You'll see that writing testing strategy and providing testing URLs when you create the ticket, it's actually a kindness to you. Because 6 weeks later, when this is in staging, ready to go to prod, and you have to review it, you're going to realize you wouldn't remember on your own what was required. So having these steps laid out for you when you create it is a kindness. We can see in this example, I'm asking them to open Search Console, to request the URL, to copy and paste the editor, search for a specific tag, make sure context is correct. And again, give those testing URLs, those expected to be impacted.
And finally, keep your rehearsals focused. It's not a one-time process. You should constantly be looking to refine, look for new issues and improve. It's really important to keep updated with the progress of tickets, especially if related issues pop up so you know what is being currently worked on. Understand the development cycle. A lot of teams work in sprints, so being aware of when the fixes are likely to roll out will really help. Where possible, use crawlers like DeepCrawl to crawl your development websites to confirm that fixes are correct before sending live. It's often really good as well to reschedule or schedule crawls for your live domain when you know the fixes are due to be released, so you can do that double check. Another recommendation, which may seem really obvious, is to note down when fixes are rolled out. Your future self will thank you when you're reviewing your crawl data later, and you can see the impact of those fixes.
And Michelle, you've got experience as a developer. It's really important to stay in scope. Would you say?
Yes, definitely.
Scope creep is incredibly real. It's when you send a ticket in and then you ask for just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. Well, all of those changes bloat out the scope and they mean delays to your project. So keeping it focused is going to mean things move faster. All right, 1, 2, cha-cha-cha. Let's move to monitoring. We've done the first move. Let's look back at it and see what's changed. We can glide effortlessly on this SEO stage. We've got all these pieces together. This dance has prepared us with the momentum to keep moving as we need to. So we know what should be monitored. We know what's changed. And now we want to keep an eye on the site to be aware of the new issues that might arrive. Sometimes you submit a fix to get rid of something that seems so silly, and then you realize that silly, stupid thing was actually, for some reason, incredibly necessary to a site. Like, that's so dumb. Why is that code there? That makes no sense. And then someone removes it and everything breaks. This is a great time to use Analytics Hub.
With your ongoing monitoring, it's important to have a crawl strategy, which includes things like different setups, URLs crawled, and are scheduled for different times. So this strategy should ideally also include different sizes of crawls. So you may, for example, decide to have your larger full site crawls running monthly, but then have your more focused crawls of your important sections more regularly so you can get those insights quicker. These crawls will help you to establish a baseline. so you can understand any issues and changes as they arrive. With the trend lines of previous crawls and numbers for URLs added and removed, you can easily see when issues and changes have occurred. And this data will also help to demonstrate the impact of fixes, because everyone loves good news.
Everyone wants that high five of, hey, that ticket that you released, look what it did. This is fantastic. It gets them engaged. It gets them invested. I definitely recall a lot of people, a lot of developers being like, SEO is witchcraft. It's malarkey, and you go and read the bones. But when you can show, no, here's the KPI, here's the measurement, here's the impact your work did, it's great. It gets that team engaged and excited. What if I've got a lot of projects running, Michelle?
So we're really excited now to give you a sneak peek of something we've been working on here at DeepCrawl. So the aim of this is to provide a way to easily compare issues for multiple projects. So you may have crawls set up for multiple domains or site sections, and in here you'll be able to easily compare trend lines and issues and monitor all of your projects in one place. Also, something really exciting is that we're adding configurable alerts, so you'll get notified when certain criteria or thresholds are met. This is coming very soon, so we're really happy that we're able to give this tiny sneak peek today.
This is exciting, especially if your Monday morning is typically going through analytics and properties and just doing that monitoring of, is everyone alive? This is great. It's one place to see it all. You can configure what columns are up, what matters to you. It's a reprieve for that bloated inbox of chaos and 28,000 Slack messages. Logs are my friend. I know they're a badge of honor to get, and it makes sense why. But they're so valuable because they let us see Googlebot's actions. And actions mean more than words. We've seen that sometimes even the team there doesn't really know what their code does, but we can observe it and get a source of truth. So if you can have access to logs, set up monitoring. Be alerted when there's suddenly a massive spike or a crash. That will have you there immediately rather than a couple days later when Search Console data is updated. We can extract URLs visited by Googlebot. We can see trends and patterns. If you don't have access to logs, the crawl stats report is wonderful. It's not going to give you quite the same detail that you'll get from your own server logs, but it's a place to start. And if nothing else, it can be a proof of concept to teams that have access to server logs. You can show them, look what I did using just this very vague data. If you provide me with access to this more detailed data, here's what I can do. Here's how I can help you. Because the DevOps team doesn't like that 4 a.m. phone call either when something's gone down. Also love your DevOps team. They have long sprints of being on call. Whew, server health is a thing. But hey, Michelle, tell me about some Search Console coverage reports.
Yeah, so coverage is probably my most visited section in Search Console. Essentially, it gives information about which pages Google found on your website, which are indexed, and which have problems. They're grouped in error, valid with warnings, valid, and excluded. And each section has reasons why, such as blocked by robots.txt, with some URL examples. These reports are a great way to monitor issues Google may be encountering, so the trend lines make it easy to see problems as they arrive. One thing to note is that the coverage report information, such as URLs listed, can be out of sync. So, for example, you may see a URL listed as submitted URL not accepted as canonical, but when you use URL Inspector, it states the URL is indexed. Google confirmed that coverage reports do refresh at a slower rate. So in cases where it's different, you should accept the URL Inspector status as the correct one. And another tip that we wanted to mention is surrounding sitemap files. So a lot of sites will have a sitemap index file, which essentially lists all the child sitemaps within that. So this is great when you have a larger site because you only have the one file to list in your robots.txt. But unfortunately, currently with Search Console, when you submit this file, you will only be able to see coverage data for the whole of the index sitemap, which can obviously be quite big to analyze if it's a really large site. So we would always recommend to individually submit your child sitemaps as well, because then you will get access to the coverage data for them. So it won't be instant, it will take a few days to populate, but when you do, you'll be able to see analyze indexing issues on a much smaller scale. And it will really help you more if you have these sitemaps separated by type. So if you have sitemaps for your product and categories, you will be able to analyze those in a much easier way, essentially.
And we can use sitemaps not only to tell Google about where content is, but as a diagnostic as well. And this is when we make changes to how they should behave, the reason they're so good for monitoring. Google is telling us exactly that sitemap you submitted where you made changes, those products, it's now gone from software of horrors to being valid. And you can prove the validity and the impact of the work you've done. Monitoring field data over time. We go to the Crux dashboard. This is, again, our real humans out in the wild as they experience your site, freshly updated the second Tuesday of every month with a new dump of data to tell you whether or not you have passed the Core Vitals assessment. You can make your own dashboard. If you haven't yet, follow this link. It takes 60 seconds max, and you're going to get really good data on what matters to real humans instead of, that guy in the office who's like, it works on my machine. If you have that C-level who you kind of have to jingle your proverbial keys at to get them to buy in or focus on something like page performance because perhaps it's really bloated and slow and sluggish, give them a nudge by showing them how much better the competitors are doing. This is a custom dashboard made by Rachel when she was on the amazing Deep Crawl crew. Thank you, Rachel Anderson. We adore you. But what you can do here is compare LCP for your client and their competitors. And that little nudge of your dreaded enemy is doing better than you can get that buy-in. All right, we have glided onto this dance floor, found our data sources, figured out how to measure them, the exact mechanics of our dance moves, so we could take that to our teams and iterate. We've monitored the changes they've made, and we keep moving. This dance doesn't end. It has a lot of partners. Once upon a time in the long, long ago, SEO used to be this isolated little bubble that worried about keywords and links on a spreadsheet. Now we are interacting. We are pivoting between engineering and UX, between product and the whim of search engines who arbitrarily decide what they're going to do. And we really don't have a ton of say about that GA4 aftermath. But you can make the dance. You can keep moving and stay on that floor. Thank you all. Michelle, thank you so much. I'm so happy to get to do a webinar with you.
Thank you. Yeah, my first webinar. I was very nervous, but I made it.
Round of applause for Michelle's first webinar. I have been being like, you're brilliant. Please share it with people. And she's like, no, I refuse. So we have a beautiful thing today. All right, dear audience. Do we have questions, comments, concerns, conundrums, canaries? What you got?
Oh, no, we can't hear you, Heather.
Oh, there's a Q&A button over here. I'm going to click that. Oh, this is relevant. What are your thoughts on sunsetting UA in favor of GA4? I think that I'm very thankful that I don't interact with analytics a lot these days. From what I hear, it's pretty problematic. And my take on it is Austria just ruled that universal analytics as is violates GDPR. The move to GA4 is a push that says, technically, you configured it to track that thing that is questionable in European courts. We didn't do it. Michelle, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm very concerned about the fact that you're not going to be able to have the data. So people may just switch very last minute and then not realize. I think the current advice is to set up your GA4 properties now. But yeah, it's a big change. And, personally, I don't like change. So I was very surprised.
It's going to be a big shift in mapping up metrics so that they're consistent between UA and GA4. Going to be a struggle for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I would agree.
Hey, Jenny, thanks for your question. Jenny asked us, did you say that Core Provider's competitor comparison insights in Deep Crawl? That is a custom Data Studio dashboard that was made by our team. So there's a link in there. You can go to the template, make your own copy, and change out the data. Actually, Rachel wrote a great blog as well that is a tutorial for the step-by-step.
Awesome. Can you ladies hear me now?
We can. Welcome back.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So we get a question from David. He said, do you know why Google Inspect URL tool will sometimes say that a URL is submitted and indexed, but then if you do a site for the same, it's not found for the URL itself in Google?
I'm assuming that means like a cache query.
Yeah, I don't think it's not really stated. That was a long one. Do you know why Google Inspect URL will sometimes say a URL is submitted and indexed, but then if you do a site colon for the same URL, it's not found, or if you search the URL in Google, it's not found?
There's two reasons for this. One, when you do the inspector, it will give you the canonical version of that copy. So it could be that URL is indexed, but the address that you used was not the one they indexed. There's multiple versions. You're looking at the canonical version when you do that URL inspection. So look at the information about the canonical on there. That can be it. Another reason, John Mueller just tweeted about this last week, there's sometimes a lag between data centers. So not all the sources get data pushed at the same time. Michelle, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the canonical thing is spot on. And also, I think more trust should be put into Search Console rather than the site query, because that's not always accurate to measure indexing.
Okay, they use the site colon and the canonical matches the URL. That's a great mystery. I don't have an answer for that one.
All right.
See if it's getting traffic in Search Console. Maybe the site operator isn't working as expected. Try the cache operator with the URL exactly.
Okay. Well, let's try another one. So Enkel is asking, how do we test Core Web Vitals in a lab and field environment?
PageSpeed's Insights API. That's the one that'll do it for you.
Perfect. Amy is asking, I'm a dev team, so just herself as the dev team. How best to learn the how-tos of technical SEO? So she has an understanding, she understands the reporting like in Google Console, but like Chrome DevTools, Waterfall, what is she looking for in code? So basically like, the how-tos of technical.
Rachel and I actually did a great, I think it was a Brighton talk or a webinar about using Chrome DevTools for SEO. That video is available on the Deep Crawl blog. So we'll tweet that out.
Awesome. You answered Jenny's question. So Mohammed says, Jamie, Michelle, great webinar. How can we manage the child sitemap of the same website?
Oh, Michelle's answer for this.
I'm not sure what you mean by manage. Do you mean submitting it individually, or how you manage it in Search Console? Because generally you would submit. So if you list your index file in your robots.txt, Google will find that and it'll appear in the sitemap report. So you'll have to manually, individually submit the child sitemaps in Search Console by using like the add sitemap. It's not going to be a negative by having both available. So having the index and the child in there at the same time, it will just give you that greater visibility into the individual indexing.
And you can click the index coverage report and it gives you all the nice graphs, yes, but of that specific sitemap.
Yeah, it's so useful, especially if you have the individual types, like you have your product ones, because if you're just trying to analyze a whole index file for a large site, it can just be a bit of a nightmare. And also with the 1,000 URL limit as well, you get more for your money.
Manageable chunks segmented out in meaningful ways.
Yes.
So Monica asks, do you know why some crawlers report 502 errors for crawling a site, but there is no disallow for any robot? The site is
Ooh.
indexed by Googlebot.
Servers couldn't handle that many requests. 502s have a tendency to exist. Probably hit the server too hard and it couldn't process. Slow down your crawl.
Yeah, there's normally a setting to change the crawl rate. So it could be you're changing it from like 3 URLs per second to 1. Yeah, I would look at that first to try and reduce
I've definitely accidentally taken down many a staging site. Yeah.
Yes.
When you're crawling a staging site or even a production site, it's always helpful to give them the user agent you're going to be crawling with and say, hey, if this is too much, if DevOps starts getting red alerts saying their servers are unhealthy with the number of requests coming on, that way they can quickly communicate with you and you can pull back that crawl, pause that crawl. This communication is going to help you make allies.
Yeah, and always verify as well. So you may be seeing 500 errors in, for example, crawler, but just check things like crawl stats to make sure that it isn't affecting Googlebot as well. And your logs, obviously.
Okay. Aries is asking, my company wants to remove 3,000 pages from the site. Many pages have duplicate content across the site. What's the best way to find out if any of the pages being removed are the canonicals for the pages that are remaining?
URL inspector. It's going to give you information on the user declared canonical and Google's canonical. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great
3,000
for it.
You're going to have to do it over 2 days or have multiple properties that you can do it from. But that's your best answer, unless you want to copy and paste 3,000 URLs into the GSC GUI, which you can milk the clock for.
No thanks.
All right. We've gotten through most of the questions. So if you all have any more, we're happy to take them. Jamie, Michelle, anything you want to make sure that we kind of touch on and see if we get another straggler or two?
Hey, Michelle, what's your #1 tip for working with developers?
Ooh, I think you've mentioned a lot of it already, but like knowing what is important and making sure to include that documentation, like to the SEO resources, I think it's really important. And just having the repo steps, especially when you're making tickets, because it's very easy when you first start to just say, oh, look, here's this export. You know, you got a load of broken 404s. Here's the export of like 10,000 URLs. Can you please fix it? Like, there's no focus there. If you're providing the exact place that it's coming from, so say it's a drop-down navigation causing those 10,000 404s, that's a lot easier to go and fix. So yeah, be more focused and provide documentation, I'd say.
The repo steps of your observation are so important. Think of it like if you took your car to the mechanic and you're like, the metal thing makes a noise. What are you referring to? You don't want the shop to go ahead and replace your transmission when you actually meant it was your brakes.
We did get a couple more come in. Okay. So we have one from Christina. Grabs them out of here so fast that sometimes I can't catch them. It's just in there, Christina. Some of my keywords / content are on both subdomain and the main domain. Is that a problem?
Was Hannibal Lecter a good psychiatrist?
There's your answer.
Michelle, thoughts? I mean, you talked pretty well about finding all those subdomains. Can you tell us more about the impact? Have you seen rankings drop because there were 2 similar versions competing?
Yeah, exactly. It depends on is it the same site on the main domain and the subdomain? Because yeah, that would be competing. But it is technically, I think John Mueller said that subdomains are treated as separate sites. So if it is different content, it shouldn't be a problem. But yeah, I'll just be checking for the duplicate content.
I think you're best off having one strong asset that truly represents the user intent than having 2, because then you're splitting your strength and your authority insert between them. Yeah,
and also there's that big debate between the subdomain and the subfolder, which I'm not even going to go into. But
I like subfolders because it's easier to see everything in one place, but that's just my thought.
Yes, agreed.
All right. Well, I think maybe we've got time for one more question. We got one from Hannah. She said, did I understand it correctly that the screenshot of the URL inspection tool is not the same than copy pasting the rendering HTML in Chrome DevTools and looking at the page there?
Correct. That live test that gives you a screenshot, the live test bypasses Google Cache. Google stopped respecting max age headers because people were being like, this JavaScript file changes every 5 seconds, and it didn't. So they're looking for E tags or if modified sense. They cache things really long time, very aggressively. Live test ignores all of that caching. It goes and grabs all the resources as if it was fresh and new. That means you're more likely to have other errors. Other errors typically mean there were too many synchronous resources requested at once. Googlebot only has so many hands, or proverbially as a little spot biter, legs, and it can't grab 27 things, but only has 8 hands.
All right.
Live test, useful for screenshots, but more likely to have script errors.
All right. Do we want to take one more?
Yeah, game on. We're going to go out with a bang. What we got?
That's it. So Christina's asking, is it helpful to SEO to implement Google AMP?
No.
Ooh.
Actually,
No, it doesn't seem so anymore.
yeah, AMP, the team is pivoting to basically a new initiative. AMP was well-intended, but it does not seem to have active development behind it any longer.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's been case studies, I think by Barry Adams, where they have moved away from AMP and actually seen an improvement. So it's worth checking those out.
And you don't need AMP to be top carousel anymore. Top news carousel.
Perfect. So with that, I think we've come to just about the end of our time, just about the end of our questions. So Michelle, Jamie, thank you for being here. Why don't you tell the people where to find you in DeepCrawl?
You can find me on Twitter at jammer_Waltz. You can also find me on the ProServe team at DeepCrawl.
Yep, you can find me on Twitter at ShellyWeb. Yeah, and at DeepCrawl.
Awesome.
Or LinkedIn, I don't know, whatever is best for you.
And with that, I want to thank you both again last time for being here with us. It's always great having DeepCrawl on. I really appreciate it. So with that, I hope everybody has a great day, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Thanks. Bye, guys.
Thank you.